Circuit Court of the 18th Judicial Circuit in and for Seminole County, Florida. State of Florida versus George Zimmerman. Verdict: we the jury find George Zimmerman not guilty. So say we all 4%.
Well, that was the verdict that came down late Saturday night in the Trayvon Martin murder case, a verdict that has ignited protests across the country. We even saw it on our own panel, people disagreeing, as everybody has the right to do, and has both George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin's family dealing with death threats, as well as George Zimmerman's defense team, who join us now. Please welcome Mark O'Mara and Don West.
Good morning.
We even had police outside of the studio today, not waiting for us, but waiting to protect you, because there are people who are so angry that your own lives are in danger. Is that the case?
Sort of. I think what's happened in this case has been the focus point for a lot of concerns and emotions that people have about the way certain people, young black males, are treated in the system, and this became the focus point of it. So the emotions that are attached to that conversation now become part of the Zimmerman conversation, even though they're not directly related.
Well, what do you say to people who are protesting? And there are people down who feel that the country is divided, perhaps the way they were with the O.J. Simpson verdict. What do you say to people?
I say to them, pay attention, and let's use this as an opportunity to try to come together. There have to be some lessons from this.
What are they?
The jury made their decision based on the evidence in the case, and that's not necessarily the basis of the opinions that people outside the case hold. We should maybe sort that out first and use that as a way that we can all have a conversation that can mean something.
You've mentioned the evidence, and there's one key question that everyone sort of talks about, and that is sort of who initiated this, et cetera. And you heard me talking in the previous block. One of the things I think that was least credible about George Zimmerman's account is the idea that Trayvon Martin was sort of hiding in the bushes and that he jumped Zimmerman out of nowhere. That's the account, the part of the account I think that people have the hardest time with. Can you understand why that's sort of hard to accept?
Absolutely. I don't think that he said it quite like that. I think what happened, this was the intersection of two people, neither one of which knew what the other one was thinking or doing. George Zimmerman obviously looked at Trayvon Martin with the history of a lot of other burglaries in the neighborhood and said, I called him suspicious, and did what he did based upon that premise. Trayvon Martin looked at George Zimmerman following him and said, I don't like this guy following me. Somehow it happened that happened for about 2 or 3 minutes. We know one thing, that George Zimmerman did something for about a minute that's not on tape. We also know that Trayvon Martin did something for about 4 minutes after he said to the person on the phone that he was running.
Zimmerman still says, when he's asked, he says he came from over there, he points to this area of the bushes, basically suggesting that Trayvon Martin jumped him.
I think what he said was he came from the darkness, because it was very dark out there, came up and said words like, why are you following me? That's supported by the evidence. George said, what are you talking about? And then, according to George, he was hit. Now, I don't know what led Trayvon Martin to think that he had to do that at that point, but the evidence seems to be uncontradicted that that's what started the physical confrontation. Was it premised by the fact that Trayvon was afraid for what George was doing in Trayvon's mind? Maybe so.
One of the things that sort of got me was that the description of this supposed fight that went on. So, and I just want to be clear, and it's a question I asked just before we went to break. So, Trayvon Martin is on top of George Zimmerman? Okay. And is he holding his arms?
He's beating the hell out of him.
There are a couple of vantage points, a couple of views. One, of course, is what Mr. Zimmerman said.
Right.
But there's also precisely what the neighbor that witnessed it said.
Right, but so what did the neighbor who witnessed it say?
So that George Zimmerman was on his back, on the ground, and that Trayvon Martin was straddling him.
Right.
And the description was striking him in an MMA style.
Okay, so I don't know what MMA is.
And grass on his back.
I'm curious, because if George Zimmerman is on his back on the ground, as this, I don't know what that is, but why wouldn't George just hit him and knock him off him? Because I don't understand the need to shoot and kill.
You're in the rain.
To me, when you kill
It's
somebody,
dark.
it's an issue. But why not just punch him and get him off him?
We offered evidence in the case to help answer that question.
Right.
One of them was, what is MMA?
Yeah.
There was this concept of ground and pound. That was the description that the witness used, and it was explained in the trial that was a position that essentially renders the person on the ground helpless, that they have very, very few options. And George Zimmerman explained how he tried to use the little option that he had to get his head off the concrete. And we also offered a use of force expert, retired law enforcement, who explained
he was able to get his hand out. He was able to move the gun this way. If he was to do that,
why didn't the neighbors come out and help him when he heard him screaming? Why didn't the neighbors come out?
I think that's it. Why wouldn't George Zimmerman have hit him where he could?
Try and answer it.
You ever had somebody try to crush your skull on concrete?
That night from both sides. We now know that. We know that somebody was screaming for 45 seconds. I'm going to take the premise that it was George Zimmerman screaming, because at least John did one witness say he saw somebody on the bottom, thought that was the person screaming, and George was the one getting injured. If that's the premise, if George Zimmerman was there getting beat up, and it looks uncontroversial that he was, follow me, was getting hurt in the face and in the back of the head, and
He was dazed.
listening, getting beat up the way he was
dazed.
in his mind, maybe the options weren't there besides what he did, because if in fact he is getting his head struck on cement, and if you've ever had that done, it hurts. Okay, and you know you're also not thinking about every time.
And you still had your arm able to, you had an alternative to shooting this kid.
Have you been mugged yourself? Have you been beaten up yourself, Wolfie? Huh?
We will come back with more of you, but I do, just because we're here, we've talked about your own fear of danger. Your wife is in our audience, Jennifer, and I'm sure she has the same feeling. Do you have any idea where George Zimmerman is?
He is in hiding, and I think he's going to stay there because there is still a segment of the...
How long does he stay there?
I don't know if he ever walks the street again, not wondering if the person coming at him or walking behind him is going to have the anger that we now see in some of the tweets and some of the information, because there is so much emotion attached to this case. It carries with it so much more than just what happened that night. And I think that he may have to live in the fear that that's going to be visited upon him.
We appreciate your both being here. We'll be back with more questions.
When is the last time somebody called the cops, didn't know how close they were en route, and then they turn around and shoot somebody? When is the last time? When is the first time? I've never heard of that before. Would that be under America's dumbest criminals? George Zimmerman, as far as I'm concerned, he freed America and put fear into millions of hearts of punk thugs that have been terrorizing innocent Americans for years. As far as I'm concerned, he should get the Medal of Honor award for what he did. I'll never understand why it is NAACP, when it comes to somebody else being violated, their mouths are shut. They don't say anything about these punk thugs that go up and down the road with their thumping basses. They don't talk nothing about black-on-black crime. Seems to me like they're only just concerned about themselves and themselves only, and the hell with everybody else. Now, if the NAACP was truly a fair organization, no matter what race there are, if they were being violated, they would come to their aid. They don't do that. Let's talk about George Zimmerman being gutsy, protecting many gutless wonders. Lana Bauer. Oh, on the 911 tape, I don't want to go out there. I'm well kept. I might break a fingernail, but in the meantime, George
school where he was fighting and stuff like that. So you want to put the blame, why not put the blame on the NAACP not correcting their own people? As far as hoodies are concerned?
As far as I'm concerned about hoodies?
In the circuit court,